On my head. What a party that was. Keiser Report 1000. Hi, I'm Max Keiser. Stacy?
Yes, as you see, we are still, we have been celebrating for 2 days now. And we are still out in the sunshine, by the way. That's why we're wearing sunglasses as well. And as you can see, we are not in London yet. We're still here in North Carolina. And that's important because in the second half, we're going to go to Lyle Estill of Biofuels Co-op. And there's a lot of local stuff happening here in Pittsboro, North Carolina.
We don't want to make the mistake the mainstream media did leading up to the last election by ignoring what's actually happening on the ground.
Yes.
We want to go see people, talk to people, get the real news.
In order to understand deglobalization, it's important to understand localization, what's happening on the local level in terms of economies, what people are doing, what individuals are doing to make America great again, to produce their own sort of economics, to produce their own financial systems. There's a local currency here called the Plenty. You're going to talk to Lyle Estill about that as well. But my first headline reads, Germany versus China, neoliberalism strikes back. In the conflict between Beijing, Berlin, and Brussels over skyrocketing investment by Chinese firms in European high-tech industries, China has a major advantage. It has a plan. Germany doesn't. Neither does the European Union. Yes, neoliberalism does not allow you to make plans. You can do trade deals which keep out competition under neoliberalism, but you're not allowed to be like the Chinese and have a plan for your economy, especially an industrial plan.
Right, so the Chinese have 5-year plans. They get together every 5 years to get a new leader. They have a new plan. Germany likes to rely on free market capitalism, neoliberalism, see what the market produces, see how prices are going, and let the magic of the Enlightenment, going back to Adam Smith, inform them as to how their economy will grow. China is saying, wait a minute, we are a hybrid capitalism, communism system. We have a 5-year plan, and we have a lot of cash, and we want to acquire as many income-producing assets as possible. They want to become the global rentiers. They want to own all the cash flow. And Germany is a sitting duck because, as you are alerting to, Germany has no way to fight back against China's 5-year plan, because for Germany to say, wait a minute, we need a 5-year counterplan, then people will say, wait a minute, you can't have an industrial policy. You can't have a government running the private sector. This is supposed to be free market capitalism. And as a result, they're going to get their heads handed to them. You know, Warren Buffett showed up there a few years ago and tried to buy these fantastic German companies, private companies, family-run companies.
They're called. Mittelstands.
The Mittelstand. And nobody would sell to Warren Buffett. Here's a guy with an enormous checkbook who would pay a lot of money. But China is paying double, triple, quadruple, and they're losing them.
Huge checkbook. So Warren Buffett at the most is worth $50–60 billion. Much of that has been given to the Gates Foundation in order to apply the intellectual property right to solving basically poverty, they say. But here we have China with a huge checkbook. It's going throughout Latin America, through Africa, through Asia with this big checkbook. It's not coercing people into trade deals or wars. It's actually buying these companies. So again, going back to this plan, going back to this headline about how neoliberalism is eating Germany's lunch, is while trade experts warn that a recent spending spree by Chinese companies, many of them supported by the Chinese government, will harm the competitiveness of European business in the long term, Berlin and Brussels are struggling to come up with a political response. Quote, as we don't have EU-owned companies, we cannot behave the same as China, European Commission Vice President Jukka Katainen told Politico. That sounds like a Finnish name. But remember, we've also been covering this in terms of, you know, in the UK, they have a big policy of privatizing state-owned companies and industries like steel and British Telecom and the rail system and water and electric. And what they've done is like sell it to Chinese state-owned companies or French state-owned companies or German state-owned companies. So there was no privatization. It's just a neoliberal scam.
Right. Well, this is a huge rogue financial wave that could upset Germany in profound ways. You know, remember Germany, they invented the welfare system under Bismarck, and it works to this day. Their social programs are in surplus, unlike other countries like the UK or the US where they're in deficit, and they have fantastic wages that support dynamism and growth. But now to have this wave of cash come in, one of the fallouts from this could be a total upset in the property market because, you know, in Germany, people tend to rent, they don't buy. They're very frugal with their cash. There's very little inflation in the real estate sector. That's beginning to change now. If you put in $500 billion of Chinese money into this economy, you're going to start to see a real estate bubble develop, which is going to cause poverty in the property market. It's going to cause people unable to get a property, and then you're going to have the same kind of social problems that you're having in the UK.
So let's stick with this free trade and neoliberalism. This is the theme of the show because we're going to go into the second half and you're going to talk about localization and local economies. So here we have a report from the Arch-Druid report. I know you think because we're in North Carolina, we've escaped Druids of the United Kingdom. Well, in fact, there are Druids here in America. This guy is based out of, I think it's Maryland or Baltimore or something. And he talks about deindustrialization and industrial policy from a Druid angle. And here his headline reads, "The Free Trade Fallacy." So he's talking about, well, it's in the context of this deglobalization movement by the voter. The voter is rejecting globalization, whether it's Brexit or Trump, that's their vote. And he points out that it's not always remembered that there have been two great eras of free trade in modern history. The first from the 1860s to the beginning of the Great Depression, in which the United States never fully participated. The second from the 1980s to the present, with the United States at dead center, and neither one of them ushered in a world of universal prosperity. Quite the contrary, both of them yielded identical results: staggering profits for the rich, impoverishment and immiseration to the working classes, and cascading economic crises. The first such era ended in the Great Depression. The second one, just at the moment, looks as though it could end the same way.
Well, it's not for nothing that this comes from a Druid, because Druids, of course, predate monotheism. They ascribe more to a world of polytheism, paganism. They look at more as a holistic worldview of an ecosystem that is working comprehensively around the world. And then along came monotheism, and we see the rise of wealth concentration in the name of the god of mammon, or money. And today, we're seeing that concentration of wealth become ever more acute. And the problems that you relate during those two periods are when the god of money was worshipped to the predictable end game, which is what you find in a game of Monopoly. You know, when you play Monopoly, at the end there's only one winner. Mm-hmm. And that's what happens typically in an unbalanced capitalist system.
This is what this guy is saying, that in the total free trade, open borders for capital and goods, is what you have is just a decline in wages from the developed economies. And this has caused, basically over and over, it happened with the British Empire and that collapse. Now it's happening with the collapse of the American Empire. And part of it is that the workers' wages are declining as they go to these free trade deals as it's collapsing. That's a way to keep the investment game going, because what happens is the wealthy, once, say, Warren Buffett, you mentioned he has $60 billion. Well, it's hard to spend that kind of money. It's really difficult. And so he has he's not consuming, and we live in a consumer economy, so he invests. And what does he invest? There's more and more capital concentrated in the hands of a few, and they start chasing investments. And this is what he points out, is that then you have these speculative bubbles in property and stock markets. Stock markets are hitting all-time highs. Properties in the United States hitting all-time highs, even though ownership rates are the lowest.
Right, because the cost of capital drops with aggregated wealth. I mean, I can fix the global economy in 5 seconds. Simply make the cost of capital rise along with aggregated wealth. So if you're poor...
Well, you can't, but that's the problem, as he points out, is like, because there's so much money in the hands of a few, they buy huge amounts of treasuries. They drive down interest rates.
Right. I mean, but there's a way to fix that. If you're poor, your cost of capital would be commensurately lower. If you're Warren Buffett, your cost of capital would rise. If you're Bill Gates, your cost of capital would rise. To do mergers and acquisitions for Warren Buffett to acquire companies without adding any productivity to the economy, you shouldn't be allowed to do that with virtually free money borrowed from a central banking system that is enabling this aggregation of wealth and social unrest.
So let's look at Goldman Sachs. They're the face of this sort of rentier capitalism in America, this neoliberal capitalism, because they have a headline here and it encapsulates all of this theories from this Druid in Baltimore to the article about China buying up German companies, because this is the end game, as the Arch-Druid points out. What will lift the world economy? Goldman says higher oil prices. So Goldman Sachs says higher oil prices will save the global economy. And they don't mention the fact that the CapEx went up, the capital expenditure. That was the only good thing about the whole fracking revolution, was that there was actually capital expenditure and good paying jobs for like 1 million guys and some women out in Dakotas and Wyoming and Oklahoma and Texas. But what they say, why they believe it'll be good for the economy, is actually the death knell, it's the end of it. Because they say pricey crude means economies such as Saudi Arabia take in more money than they can spend, which financial markets help distribute through the rest of the world, boosting asset values and consumer confidence. The difference between today and the 1970s is that oil creates global liquidity through a far more sophisticated financial system, their research note points out. More sophisticated financial markets in the 2000s were able to transform the excess savings into greater global liquidity that increased asset values, lowered interest rates, and improved credit conditions that span the globe.
Right. Well, the oil industry can turn around and point to Goldman Sachs and say what we need to save the economy is higher interest rates. In other words, this is the dynamic that runs the global economy, the price of oil, the price of interest rates. As I've said on this show for 1,000 episodes, Goldman, oil industry, Goldman, Saudi Arabia, America, okay, interest rates, oil. I mean, interest rates could easily go up to solve the world crisis. That's my preferable method. Raising the price of oil, as you suggest, it sounds interesting on paper, but the knock-on effects are devastatingly bad.
Yeah, but again, tying all these headlines together, Max, neoliberalism, contractualization, and actual production, like Germany still produces things. They still create wealth. They think it's just moving money around, moving contracts around, and moving debt around is the answer to everything.
They'll be hoisted by their own petard. They targeted Greece for destruction, and they made a bunch of money doing so. Now the global neoliberals are going to target Germany for destruction. Ha, ha, ha.
Okay, but here I'm saying, finally, people have to understand that wealth needs to be created. Jobs need to be created. Consumption needs to happen. This is what drives capitalism, and this is why we're here in Pittsboro, North Carolina, because you're going to go talk to Lyle Estill at the Biofuels Co-op in the second half and what he's doing to create a local economy.
Stay tuned for the second half. Go local! Go local! Welcome back to the Keiser Report. We're talking about globalization, deglobalization, and localization. I am with a biofuel magnate. I don't know if you'd call yourself that exactly, but we're here with Lyle Estill at the biofuel plant. Welcome.
Thank you, Max.
All right, so this is a fascinating facility. We're going to take a tour in a moment here, but give us the brief biofuel company synopsis.
Well, at Piedmont Biofuels in Pittsboro, we've been working on how we would make enough fuel to power our community. We also work on things like growing our own food and creating our own electricity, various ways that we can build resilience into our local economy.
Let's take a tour. This is a fascinating place. The Abundance Foundation, Piedmont Biofuels.
We make biodiesel.
Yeah.
Biodiesel starts with fat.
Yeah.
Any kind of fat. And when we opened the plant, we were on virgin soybean oil. Yeah. And when that became too expensive, we switched to poultry fat.
Yep.
And when poultry fat became too expensive, we moved to used cooking oil.
Yeah, like at the fast food restaurant?
Yeah, when they're done frying with it, then we pick it up and we would turn that into fuel.
All right.
So biodiesel is a drop-in replacement for petroleum diesel. So any diesel vehicle, you don't have to convert, you don't have to go under the hood, you don't have to call your mechanic, you just fill up and drive.
You just switch over.
Exactly, you just unscrew the fuel cap, fill it up with biodiesel, and away you go.
Wow. This is the main room here, so what happens?
Well, this is where we wash the fuel and we dry the fuel and store the fuel.
Wash the fuel. What does that mean?
Well, we add water to the top of a big tank. Water is heavier than biodiesel, so you add water to the top of a 4,000-gallon tank of biodiesel. That water naturally wants to fall to the bottom. We have compressed air rings in the bottom of the tank, so the bubbles then pick pick up the water and take it back up to the top. The bubble breaks, the water comes back down, and in that way you get sort of a gentle scrubbing of the fuel.
It's like fermenting.
And in that
Is
way,
it like fermenting?
Not at all.
Not at all.
No,
I'm completely wrong about that.
It's called sparging. And,
Sparging?
Yeah, when you add a gas to a liquid, that's called sparging. And so we would sparge the fuel. And in that way you would wash out impurities. So when you cut the air off, all of what you've washed out goes to the bottom.
Is it time consuming? How many gallons a day can you do this with?
Well, this plant could make 4,000 gallons a day, and that was 2,000 gallons in the morning and 2,000 gallons in the afternoon.
Right.
So 4,000 a day times 5 days a week for 20,000 gallons, 50 weeks a year. That's how we got to be a million-gallon biodiesel plant.
That's a lot of sparging.
Yes, it is.
Are there any other plants like this in North Carolina?
Yeah.
How many?
Well, let's see. Today, I think that there's probably 5 or 6 that are operating.
All right.
Biodiesel plants tend to come and go.
Really?
There's a lot of dead ones, yeah.
You've been around for maybe...
Well, yeah.
Wow.
So we started in 2000. We started making fuel in 2002.
Wow, that's a lot of sparging.
Yes, it is.
Wow, this is the big sparging room. I don't know if I've ever been experienced with this much sparging in one location. Is sparging, is that used for any other application? Where else would you use a sparge?
Oh, sure, yeah. It's anytime you want to knock impurities out of liquid and you want to use a gas to do it, you could sparge with nitrogen or oxygen or argon or any kind of gas. We have a small community in the area of people that run around on E1001 or 100% biodiesel.
Yeah, oh, okay. Now what's the smell? The smells...
That's probably an exotic oil. So what we're doing is we aggregate fats, oils, and greases, and they're all scrap or used. So you never know what we're going to smell like. Sometimes we smell like lemon-infused almond oil.
Yeah, I'm getting a little hint of almond, lemon infusion right now.
Yeah, and what's interesting is those smells will also pass through into our exhaust.
Right. So you're making the world not only better in terms of biodiesel, but it smells better.
Well, yeah, I mean, it
do.
depends. Sometimes I'm stopped at a stoplight and I'm smelling like fries, and it makes people hungry.
Yeah,
We'll
right.
go this way.
Okay.
We have about a dozen like-minded businesses here at the plant.
Yeah.
We have a farming operation, and have a sawmill that's busy making boards, and we have there's about a dozen.
Yeah, I'm not clear in terms of the organizational chart. In other words, there's a biodiesel at the center of it, and then there's like satellite companies that are feeding into it. How does it work? What's the structure?
Well, okay, biodiesel is what started it all. So all of this was purposed for biodiesel. This is where the fats, oils, and greases would come in.
And this is what you started?
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
so you started this
Piedmont Biofuels.
Biofuels.
That's right.
And how long have you been up and running this?
Well, I've been making fuel since January of 2002.
Okay, and is there any special licensing required, or does the state want to come in and regulate, or is it pretty easy to set up a fuel company?
It's a regulatory nightmare. So we are regulated by the EPA, we're regulated by NC DENR, we're regulated by everything under the sun. In fact, the state worries more about what you put in your fuel tank than what you put in your mouth. People are always complaining about food regulations. Food regulations are a piece of cake compared to fuel.
Right.
So I would go with nightmare.
Nightmare scale. Okay. Right. So a lot of the time and energy then is spent on that just paperwork. I guess.
Well, we have a regulatory cost per gallon,
right,
which is extremely high, and that's partly because we're a little operation. So you make 1 million gallons worth of biodiesel. Your regulatory cost per gallon is much higher than if you were, say, a 100 million gallon plant.
Right. Is that so? Typically,
compliance is the same.
You're competing, I guess, to some degree with. Oh, there's a cow. Hello, cow. No, it's not a cow. I'm only kidding.
That's a little kid ringing the lunch bell.
That's
Whenever
a kid?
I hear that,
Looks like
I
a
get
cow.
hungry.
Oh, so you're competing somewhat with the traditional fuel industry.
Correct.
The big guys.
Petroleum diesel.
Yeah, and
That's
so
right.
do they. So they obviously are not happy to have any competition,
No, they don't worry about us. We're so little. Biodiesel is a spit in the bucket.
Right. But part of the reason you're a spit in the bucket is because of that regulatory hurdle.
There's no question about that. The regs are onerous, and
so one way for folks who support what you're doing, to help you, would be to lobby their politicians to make regulations easier in this industry to let it expand more aggressively. Is that a way someone can help push this forward?
I suppose that would be one thing. The other thing you could do is just drive on the fuel.
Just use the fuel.
Just use the
Get
fuel.
adoption, use the fuel.
Decide that you would rather run on biodiesel than petroleum diesel, and we're off to the races.
So if I have a diesel car, diesel truck, and I can just fill it with biodiesel, and that's it.
Off you go.
And the cost per gallon compared
It's higher.
It's higher. I get that.
Yeah.
Substantially higher or marginally higher?
Comes and goes. It depends on the price of fats, oils, and greases. So
fats, oils, and greases. Well, America's such a fat country. You'd think there'd be plenty of it at cheap price.
We're not allowed to use human.
Oh, really? It's not like Fight
it's-
Club where they
it's-
turn human fat into soap?
You get me some fat, I'll make you some fuel. The problem is that I can't use human because it's illegal. It's the heartbreak of my life that we live in the middle of this obesity epidemic, and here I am starved for fat.
Yeah, you would think people would be able to sell their fat as a way to reduce their fat and get healthier, as well as help the environment. It's a twofer. It's a two for one.
It's absolutely right. Now, the thing is that, we started on soybean, we switched to poultry fat, we are now, we run on waste cooking oil. I've spent the last 14 years on the quest for inexpensive fats, oils, and greases, which is why on this project people frequently refer to me as the cheap fat guy.
All right, so now how'd you get into this? From a background of engineering?
I was just making my own fuel for my pickup truck and my tractor in the backyard in Moncure, about 8 miles from here. And Rachel came along and she needed fuel, and Leaf jumped in and he needed fuel, and we started in the backyard and took it all the way up to a 1 million gallon facility.
Okay, so you're doing 1 million gallons a year, I guess.
That's what the Piedmont Biofuels at its peak was. I think 1.3 million was our personal best.
And what's the future look like in the next 2 or 3 years? Is this a growing industry?
It's a roller coaster, and it is. You want to get this? It is.
Yeah, let's look at this. This looks like something from the past, maybe.
Well, this is a passive solar. This is a straw bale passive solar building, and it has 500 gallons of biodiesel in it. And so our users can just pull up, swipe their membership card, fill up, and drive.
Oh, it's a filling station.
Yeah, it's a filling station.
So it's already come to fill my vehicle.
Yeah, that's right. If you had a diesel vehicle, you could pull up here, fill up, and drive. So it's one of 6 inconvenient locations that we offer to our co-op members.
That's the branding statement. More inconvenient locations than you can throw a stick at.
That's right. So, so the idea is it's a roller coaster industry. It's a Wild West roller coaster. So sometimes Uncle Sam will decide that biodiesel is a good idea, so they'll put in place a tax credit, maybe $1 a gallon.
Right.
And when that happens, the industry expands, and then maybe Congress will forget to renew it, at which point the industry contracts. And so in the past 14 years, it's been, well, sometimes when you're making biodiesel, you look like a genius, and sometimes you look like a fool, and sometimes it's just kind of eh. And so it's not fair to say, oh, this is a rapidly growing industry. Some industries, wind energy is like that, or solar energy is like that, but biodiesel would not be. It expands and contracts.
It's not scalable in the sense, let's say, like a digital company, where you're just adding servers to a server farm and your margins are high. This is really much more cost intensive. You've got the commodity itself, the oils, the fats, and I'm missing one. Oils, fats,
oils, and greases.
Fats, oils, and grease.
Fats, oils, and greases.
The holy trinity of the biofuel industry.
And you're also...
So the cost of these things are really prohibitive of expanding in a huge way.
Completely right. And we are not disconnected from global commodity markets. Right. So what happens is Argentina has a big year for soy, then the price of soybean oil craters. There's a drought in the Midwest, the price of soybean oil skyrockets. We have a poultry processing plant. Fat's affordable.
So this is
plant
not
closes.
This is a business. You're not gonna get rich on this business. I mean, what drives you? Is it more the fact that you're doing something that's environmentally sound and socially positive? Is that kind of what drives you, or are you holding out for the big score that's going to roll up into a huge business?
No, we are very much a mission-driven business,
Right.
and a social enterprise that is driven by things like clean air and a desire to be off the petroleum grid, and greed hasn't really been a big factor
Right.
in our business planning.
All right, well, there it is, Lyle. Piedmont Biofuels. Thanks for being on the show.
Okay.
Well, that's going to do it for this edition of the Keiser Report with me, Max Keiser, and Stacey Herbert. I'd like to thank our guest, Lyle Estel of the Piedmont Biofuels. If you'd like to get in touch with us on Twitter, it's Keiser Report. Until next time, bye, y'all.